Does Twitter have a double standard when it comes to terrorism on their platform?
For years, Twitter has been cracking down on terrorist groups and individuals that either use or try to use their platform. However, Antifa, whose activities, according to Politico, have been classified by the Department of Homeland Security as domestic terrorist violence, openly has dozens of active Twitter accounts.
So in this video, we're going to investigate whether Twitter has a double standard when it comes to enforcing their policies on violent extremist groups in neglecting to ban Antifa Twitter accounts. Strap in, because we're doing a full breakdown.
To contextualize Twitter's policy enforcement on violent extremist groups a bit, in August of this year, Twitter banned all accounts affiliated with a group known as the Proud Boys, and the account of the group's founder, Gavin McInnes. Some consider the Proud Boys to be a violent extremist group with ties to white nationalism, while others point to the ethnic diversity within the group, considering them to be a right-wing leaning men's club that are only violent in self-defense against groups that initiate violence. In fact, one of the rival groups of the Proud Boys is none other than Antifa.
Now, if you're not familiar with these groups, the reason why I bring up the Proud Boys being banned from Twitter is because, regardless of whatever you think about the Proud Boys, Antifa has a much more condemning track record than the Proud Boys.
We're talking assaulting people, elderly included, with bike locks, sticks, punches and kicks, throwing explosives into crowds, throwing balloons of urine into crowds.
I'm sorry to report we did have some bottles thrown at our offices that did have urine in it.
Doxing people, harassing their work to get them fired, harassing them at their home, hijacking traffic, destroying property, and so on and so on. Yet they're flourishing on Twitter. In a popular Antifa document, they even say that their favorite social media platform is Twitter. Quote, "We recommend only using Twitter." The only instance of an Antifa account being banned from Twitter that I could find was the one that doxed, threatened, and organized a mob outside of the home of Fox's Tucker Carlson. However, there are still all of these accounts, and others, just based out of the US alone, often doxing people, and Twitter has yet to do hardly anything about it.
So what gives? Are they not in violation of Twitter's terms of service? Well, let's take a look.
On the Twitter rules page, they state that you may not use our service for any unlawful purposes or in furtherance of illegal activities. Now I'm just guessing here, but I would imagine that domestic terrorist violence is illegal. Kidding aside, assault, harassment, criminal threats, destruction of property, and rioting are all illegal activities, which is why members of Antifa are often arrested and why the DHS has reportedly labeled Antifa activities as domestic terrorist violence. Next, you may not make specific threats of violence or wish for the serious physical harm, death, or disease of any individual or group of people. This includes, but is not limited to, threatening or promoting terrorism.
The whole point of Antifa Twitter accounts is to promote their terroristic activities via influencing, doxing, organizing, and networking on a popular platform while remaining fairly anonymous.
Now, some might object that Antifa doesn't promote terrorism, so let's take a look at how OxfordDictionary.com defines that word. The unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims.
Yep, fits perfectly.
Their primary aim is to destroy what they regard as fascism, which is a political aim, and they do so by unlawful use of violence and intimidation almost entirely against civilians. But what about the US legal definition? According to them, terrorism includes the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. Unlawful use of force and violence against persons? Check. Or property? Check. To intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives? Well, they say they're smashing fascism, capitalism, and racism, so check.
Okay, back to the Twitter rules.
You also may not affiliate with organizations that, whether by their own statements or activity both on and off the platform, use or promote violence against civilians to further their causes.
The key words here are also and organizations. Also is key because it indicates that what follows is not necessary to be in violation of the terms of service, of which we have already established that Antifa stands in violation. Additionally, organizations is key because although Antifa promotes violence against civilians to further their causes, it doesn't seem fitting to call Antifa an organization.
According to OxfordDictionaries.com, an organization is an organized group of people with a particular purpose, such as a business or government department. Antifa groups do have a unifying particular purpose, but they don't appear to be centrally organized, and they certainly aren't a business or government department. According to USLegal.com, an organization, by its most basic definition, is an assembly of people working together to achieve common objectives through a division of labor. An issue with this definition is that there doesn't appear to be any publicly known division of labor within Antifa groups. Lastly, according to thelawdictionary.com, an organization is a group of people structured in a specific way to achieve a series of shared goals. Relationships within an organization are determined by its structure and are typically based upon role and function.
Because Antifa doesn't appear to have a centralized, top-down structure, but act as a movement or collection of relatively autonomous groups instead, calling Antifa an organization just does not seem to fit. So, because Antifa doesn't seem to appropriately be called or classified as an organization, they don't seem to be in strict violation of this rule.
You may not engage in the targeted harassment of someone, or incite other people to do so. We consider abusive behavior an attempt to harass, intimidate, or silence someone else's voice. You may not publish or post other people's private information without their express authorization and permission. Well, Antifa doxes people both on and off Twitter. It's one of their favorite tactics. To get a better feel for Twitter's standard of policy enforcement, I reported a series of Antifa accounts that were doxing people. Twitter confirmed that they had received the reports, but so far, they have only affirmed that one of these accounts were in violation of the Twitter rules. It seems that only a doxing tweet issued or retweeted by the account was deleted, but the account itself is still up and running.
So, judging just from Twitter's basic rules page, Antifa already stands in violation of Twitter's terms of service on multiple accounts.
Oh, but look! Twitter has a page dedicated to their policies on violent extremist groups.
However, before going through this page, can Antifa be said to be a group? This is imperative because if not, then the counts on which Antifa stands in violation of Twitter's terms of service will be significantly lessened than if they can be said or classified to be a group. They would still stand in violation of Twitter's rules, but on less counts. And a further argument could be made that you can't judge Antifa accounts collectively, but rather you have to go by an account-on-account basis. I think such an argument ultimately fails because an Antifa affiliation seems sufficient in itself for the account to stand in violation of Twitter's terms of service. Alright, so is Antifa a group? That depends if a movement or collection of relatively autonomous groups qualify as a singular, unified group.
Oxford Dictionaries defines a group as a number of people or things that are located, gathered, or classified together, and a number of people that work together or share certain beliefs. Well, Antifa is a number of people classed together, but the groups don't seem to work interdependently. As strange as this might sound, unfortunately, work together is actually too broad and ambiguous to know if Antifa's collective activities meet that phrase. The Law Dictionary defines a group as two or more of something with some type of commonality. Check. Typically people who work together to achieve a common set of goals. This involves regular contact, frequent interaction, mutual influence, and some feelings of camaraderie. Do Antifa groups have mutual influence and some feelings of camaraderie for each other? Well, they call each other comrades, so yes, that seems to be the case.
But do they have regular contact and frequent interaction with each other? Within groups, certainly, but between groups? I'm not so sure that's the case.
But since Antifa is typically classified as a movement, let's look at how Oxford Dictionaries defines a movement. A group of people working together to advance their shared political, social, or artistic ideas.
So at the end of all of these microscopic investigations into key terms, even though Antifa does not seem to have a centralized structure necessary, or at least seemingly necessary, to qualify as an organization, it does seem perfectly fair to call them a group, which means they could theoretically be classified as a violent extremist group, as Twitter puts it.
And even if they couldn't be said to be a group, Antifa is a unifying banner with specified objectives, guidelines, tactics, obligations, and disqualifications to be associated with that banner. And an association with a violent extremist banner would appear to be sufficient for the Twitter ban hammer.
But okay, moving along as if they're a group.
We will not tolerate groups or individuals associated with them who engage in and promote violence against civilians both on and off the platform. Yep, they're describing Antifa pretty well here. Accounts affiliated with groups in which violence is a component of advancing their cause risk having a chilling effect on opponents and bystanders. The violence that such groups promote could also have dangerous consequences offline, jeopardizing their targets' physical safety. We prohibit the use of Twitter services by violent extremist groups, i.e. identified groups subscribing to the use of violence as a means to advance their cause, whether political, religious, or social. Okay, so not only is violence a component of advancing their cause, it's a necessary component. We consider violent extremist groups to be those which meet all of the below criteria. Identify through their stated purpose, publications, or actions as an extremist group. I'm not sure what percentage of extremist groups identify themselves as extremist. Antifa has identified themselves as radical in a popular Antifa publication, which is synonymous with extreme. Moreover, the Proud Boys don't identify themselves as an extremist group, but were banned on grounds of being a violent extremist group. In any case, Antifa is violent and extremist in their actions, which is sufficient to meet this criterion. Have engaged in or currently engage in violence and/or the promotion of violence as a means to further their cause, already established. Target civilians in their acts and/or promotion of violence, again, already established. Behavior we look for when determining whether an account is affiliated with a violent extremist group includes stating or suggesting that an account represents or is part of a violent extremist group. Antifa is in most of their Twitter handles, typically coupled with Antifa logos as their profile pictures. So this is already sufficient for indicating to Twitter that their accounts are affiliated with a violent extremist group. Providing or distributing services, for example financial, media/propaganda, in furtherance of progressing a violent extremist group's stated goals. Engaging in or promoting acts for the violent extremist group. Recruiting for the violent extremist group.
The rest aren't nearly as provable, if provable at all. For example, I haven't found any Antifa accounts engaged in recruitment, and neither have I found any emphasis in Antifa documents on recruiting on social media.
We have a zero tolerance policy for accounts belonging to or affiliated with violent extremist groups and will permanently suspend them.
Okay, putting the logically contradictory phrase of permanent suspension aside for the moment, Twitter should have zero tolerance for accounts affiliated with Antifa. Unless Twitter wants to put out a public statement of disagreement with the DHA's assessment of Antifa's activities, unless Twitter wants to avoid classifying Antifa as a group or even a unifying banner, and thereby judge on an account-by-account basis, unless Twitter wants to ignore the plethora of videos and articles recording Antifa's criminal activities, and unless Twitter wants to make a public statement of approval of the amount of doxing that Antifa Twitter accounts perpetuate, when it comes to Antifa, Twitter just doesn't seem that interested in enforcing their policies. Now, Twitter's an enormous company, so maybe Antifa is low on their priority list. Maybe they primarily rely on user reports and there just haven't been enough yet. Maybe they're just very slow to respond. None of that seemed to be the case with the Proud Boys, but the Proud Boys, according to my fallible understanding, were more organized than Antifa. And perhaps Twitter puts a significantly higher priority on more organized groups, such as them. From an outsider's perspective looking in, how could we know? So does Twitter have a double standard when it comes to violent extremist groups? From what we've explored thus far, it certainly seems to be the case. However, we've given them some outs, or some possible reasons why they might be operating the way that they are at the moment. So I can't definitively say, yes, Twitter has a double standard when it comes to violent extremist groups or terrorist groups on their platform. But it doesn't look good for them. Thank you so much for watching this video. Really, it means a lot. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, comment down below to let me know what you thought, and I'll try to get back to you. Share it with other people, subscribe and hit that notification bell down below if you want to get updated on new videos. All of that really helps the channel and helps the videos rank higher in the search algorithms. If you want to support the channel even more, you can become a patron on Patreon, single donate on PayPal, or buy a book in one of the descriptions in the other videos, because I get a cutback from Amazon if you click the link and then buy the book. I have a few more videos that I'm working on right now that deal with much deeper subject matter than the one in this video, but I don't want to limit the channel to only very deep subjects because I'll only be pushing out videos like once every few months or something like that, and I'd like to give you guys more content. So for my amazing and beautiful subscribers, you can expect a fairly wide range of content and future videos to come, Lord willing. Thanks again. Peace.